In my previous life, I had no way to defend myself, was expelled from the shelter by the crowd, abducted by people from another camp, and subjected to inhuman torment. Returning to this very starting point of fate, I did not hesitate for even a second. I grabbed her by the hair, my voice cold as ice. You were bitten by a zombie and deliberately hid it, and you still dare to turn around and frame me. This time, the one destined to be expelled was her. I saw Emily stealing food with my own eyes. If you don't believe me, go search her backpack right now. The sharp female voice tore through the silence of the shelter. My entire body shuddered violently, and the chaos in my mind cleared in an instant. I had been reborn. Babies, a gripping post-apocalyptic novel is ready. Connect to Wi-Fi, tuck in your blankets, and let the story begin. This was the 3rd month after the apocalypse erupted. The temporary shelter we were staying in had been spontaneously formed by survivors from nearby residential blocks. In a world where resources were scarce to the extreme, food was more precious than gold, and everyone's rations were strictly limited. Stealing food was undoubtedly a capital offense that would enrage the masses. All eyes instantly focused on me, filled with scrutiny, suspicion, and a faint, barely concealed greed. In my previous life, I had never imagined that Amanda, who grew up alongside me, would suddenly turn on me. In a panic, I had taken the initiative to open my backpack, trying to prove my innocence, only to fall straight into her trap. Everyone saw with their own eyes the 2 packs of instant noodles she had secretly stuffed into my bag. Anger erupted instantly, curses and shoves coming one after another, and I was forcibly driven out of the shelter I depended on for survival. Thinking back to those days without light, I closed my eyes in pain. After being expelled, unarmed, I struggled to survive among zombie-infested ruins, only to be captured by the notorious Black Crow camp. In that place without rules or humanity, women were nothing more than tools for venting desire. I suffered endless torment and humiliation, and until the very moment of my death, I lived in regret and unwillingness. When I opened my eyes again, the fragility in them had already been replaced by resolve. I knew all too well that when falsely accused, the more eagerly you try to prove yourself, the more passive you become, because the person framing you knows better than anyone that you are innocent. They have already laid out a dragnet, waiting for you to walk right into it. Without the slightest hesitation, I stepped forward, grabbed Amanda's long hair, and dragged her brutally in front of everyone. Emily, are you insane? She clearly hadn't expected me to strike directly, and shock and pain made her voice sharp and shrill. I ignored her struggle completely, and tore open her sleeve in one motion. The next second, a bluish-black zombie bite mark was exposed before everyone's eyes. The edges of the grotesque wound were tinged with an eerie bruise, clearly a recent injury. You were bitten by a zombie, and still dared to hide it. Were you planning to drag all of us down with you? My voice was not loud, but it carried a bone-chilling cold that reached every ear present. When they saw the bite mark clearly, everyone sucked in a sharp breath, instinctively stepping back several paces, their gazes toward Amanda filled with fear and vigilance, as if she had already become a zombie on the verge of mutation. Amanda panicked completely. She never imagined that I knew she had been bitten, let alone that I would expose it publicly. She shook her head frantically, desperately trying to pull her sleeve back down to cover the wound, repeating incoherently, "No, that's not a zombie bite. I wasn't bitten." Watching her flustered state, I curled my lips into a cold smile. The timing was perfect. I stepped forward, softened my tone slightly, though my eyes remained devoid of warmth. We grew up like sisters. There's no need to make things this ugly. I won't pursue the matter of you framing me, but the lives of so many people can't be risked. You should leave on your own. In my previous life, she had spoken heartless words in almost the exact same tone, watching as I was driven out by the crowd. Now I was simply returning everything she had inflicted on me, exactly as it was. Amanda suffered a heavy blow, her voice suddenly turning sharp, as if she remembered something, screaming at the top of her lungs, "It was you! You stole the food and framed me because you were afraid of being discovered. Everyone, check her backpack. There must be stolen goods inside." Several admirers who usually followed Amanda obediently stirred restlessly, hesitation and eagerness flickering in their eyes. Calmly, I picked up the backpack beside me and slowly unzipped it in front of everyone. It was completely empty except for a badly worn handkerchief. There was nothing else. Amanda rushed over in disbelief, snatching the backpack and rummaging through it, even turning it upside down and shaking it violently, muttering to herself, "Impossible. This is impossible." I watched her futile struggle with a cold laugh. Earlier, when everyone's attention had been drawn to her bite mark and chaos had erupted, I had already taken advantage of the confusion to throw the instant noodles she'd planted in my bag into the trash outside the shelter. Having lived once already, how could I possibly fall in the same place twice? Oh my, why are your eyes so red? Don't tell me the virus has already started acting up and you're about to mutate. I pretended to recoil in fear, trembling as I pointed at her. Amanda, already shaken by successive blows and having been dragged by her hair, looked disheveled and frantic. And with her eyes reddened by fear, she indeed resembled a zombie on the brink of mutation. The crowd hesitated no longer. They shouted angrily, urging her to leave the shelter at once. In the end, several strong men stepped forward, hoisted Amanda up, and dragged her straight out the door, throwing her outside like trash, exactly the same way they had treated me in my previous life. Outside, Amanda pounded madly on the door, cries, pleas, and curses blending together without end. I saw one of her former admirers hesitate upon hearing her sobs, pity flickering across her face, some even about to speak up for her. I heard that after people turn into zombies, their flesh slowly rots, their features twist and deform, and they won't even remember who they are, only attacking the living by instinct. I looked calmly at those people and spoke slowly. Just thinking that a once close sister would become like that makes my heart ache. I paused, then my tone turned solemn. But if we don't do this, once she truly mutates and loses her humanity, all of us will be killed by her. In the apocalypse, kindness is sometimes the greatest cruelty to oneself. I raised my hand to wipe away non-existent tears, and was satisfied to see those people fall completely silent, the pity on their faces replaced by fear. When faced with life and death, those so-called affections born of superficial attraction were utterly fragile. In my previous life, I was the one expelled so mercilessly. Back then, no matter how hard I thought, I couldn't understand why Amanda, who grew up with me like a sister, would do such a thing to me. It wasn't until just before she arranged for someone to kill me that she kindly explained it. It turned out that during one outing to gather supplies, she had been bitten by a zombie. Believing she was doomed, she developed an extremely selfish thought to drag me down with her. How ridiculous. Because of one dark thought of hers, I suffered all the bitterness the world had to offer. After being expelled from the shelter, I hid like a rat in the gutters to avoid zombies and ill-intentioned survivors, until I was captured by the Black Crow camp. In that apocalyptic purgatory, without law or morality, I endured endless torment. It wasn't until the mid to late stages of the apocalypse, when people around the world began awakening special abilities, and humanity's confrontation with zombies entered a critical phase, that I awakened a water-type ability as well. Relying on that power, I finally gained a foothold in the Black Crow camp, and was no longer at others' mercy. Later, I led like-minded people from the camp toward the main base called for by the military, hoping to contribute to the final battle against the zombies, only to be intercepted and killed midway by ability users arranged at the last moment. I died filled with resentment and hatred. Recalling everything from my past life, I clenched my fists tightly. Since heaven had given me another chance, this time I would rewrite my fate and make everyone who owed me pay the price they deserved. I'll go on today's supply-gathering mission, I said proactively. The crowd looked at me in surprise. In this apocalyptic world, venturing out to collect supplies was extremely dangerous, with the constant risk of zombie attacks, and aside from scheduled rotations, almost no one would risk their life voluntarily. Ignoring their complex gazes, I quickly packed up, took a homemade machete, and left the shelter alone. Relying on memories from my previous life, I avoided several dangerous zombie-infested areas and smoothly reached an abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city. During my days imprisoned in the Black Crow camp, I had never given up on myself. I knew that in a world ruled by the law of the jungle, only by becoming strong enough could one control their own fate. So whenever I had the chance, I secretly trained my body, even volunteering for supply runs. After all, the worst outcome was death. With that ruthless determination of embracing death, I forced myself to grow stronger until no one could ever coerce me again. In this apocalypse, where brute force reigned supreme, only a hard fist spoke the truth. After awakening my ability, I personally ended several brutal camp leaders, like those of Black Crow, and established a women-only shelter with order and rules, where bullying and exploitation no longer existed. Although my current body was still relatively weak, dealing with the slower-moving zombies of the early apocalypse was more than enough. I cautiously infiltrated the factory and soon spotted a lone wandering zombie. Its body was rotten, emitting a pungent stench, its cloudy eyes devoid of awareness, relying solely on smell and sound to sense its surroundings. Silently, I circled behind it, and before it noticed, grabbed the back of its neck to restrain it. Taking a deep breath, I made a crazy decision. I released one hand and let it bite into my arm. A searing pain exploded instantly as sharp teeth pierced through fabric and flesh, icy, sticky liquid flowing down my arm. Suppressing the urge to fling it away, I grabbed the zombie that was still trying to tear at me and hurled it into the depths of the factory, into a sulfuric acid pool, churning with an intense, choking stench. The zombie struggled a few times, before quickly sinking, dissolving into a pool of black sludge. I stared tensely at the wound on my arm, my heart pounding wildly. Before my death in my previous life, Amanda had smugly revealed many things to me, and the one that mattered most was the antitoxin serum in her body. After being bitten, she had thought herself doomed, only to discover that she did not mutate at all. Overjoyed, she kept the news to herself and enjoyed the care of her admirers. Later, when the shelter held out until rescue, she finally revealed her immunity to high-ranking military officials and was instantly hailed as humanity's hope, enjoying endless privilege and reverence. When she later discovered that I was still alive and had awakened the very ability she coveted, jealousy and fear intertwined, driving her to murderous intent. She once said that our DNA sequences were almost identical. If she was immune to the zombie virus, then my body likely possessed the same trait. She feared others discovering this, feared losing her uniqueness and all the preferential treatment that came with it. So I had to die. Having been reborn, my greatest goal was to seize this opportunity and use this information to gain the upper hand. At this moment, I was gambling with my life. According to my memories, after being bitten, the virus would rapidly invade the body within 2 hours, triggering mutation. If I lost and failed to resist the virus, I would, in my final moment of sanity, jump into the sulfuric acid pool beside me, never allowing myself to become a zombie. But if I won, if I gained immunity to the zombie virus, then the ending of this apocalypse would be rewritten by my hand. At first, the wound burned with intense pain, spreading rapidly through my nerves, as if countless ants were gnawing at my organs. I could clearly feel the virus rampaging inside my body, trying to devour my vitality. I clenched my teeth, relying on sheer willpower to endure the agony without making a sound. After an unknown amount of time, the pain gradually subsided, and the ringing in my ears and splitting headache faded away. I lowered my head to look at the wound, and discovered with delight that the hideous bite mark was slowly fading, eventually disappearing completely, leaving only a faint trace, as if I had never been injured at all. I broke into a thrilled grin. This body truly had not disappointed me. It was not only immune to the zombie virus, but had also unexpectedly gained a powerful self-healing ability. According to what I knew, supernatural abilities would only begin to awaken one after another in the mid-stage of the apocalypse 5 years later. Yet here I was, at the very beginning of the apocalypse, already possessing such a powerful ability, on top of a constitution immune to the zombie virus. At this point, I could practically walk sideways through the end of the world. After calming my racing emotions, I began to search the factory carefully. Aside from confirming my immunity to the virus, there was another hypothesis I urgently needed to verify: zombie crystals. In my previous life, during the mid-stage of the apocalypse, after several rounds of zombie evolution, people discovered crystalline substances inside zombie brains. The military researched and refined these crystals and found that injecting them into the human body carried a certain probability of awakening supernatural abilities. However, the risks were enormous, because the crystals also contained the virus. Those whose bodies could not withstand the fusion process died on the spot, scenes so horrific they were unbearable to witness. So, even when people were desperate for abilities, they rarely dared to try it themselves. For civilians without access to purification equipment, many chose the most primitive and most dangerous method: swallowing zombie crystals directly. Without professional assistance, this was extremely risky. Only 1 in 1,000 could survive the fusion period and successfully awaken an ability. The rest would die in excruciating pain. There was no better option. Not everyone could enjoy military protection, and at the brink of life and death, many had no choice but to gamble everything just to survive. My luck was good. Before long, in a corner of the factory, I found another wandering zombie. Its pupils were completely clouded white, its vision gone, relying only on smell and sound to sense my presence, as it stretched out rotting green-black arms, groping toward me. Its mutated teeth were razor-sharp, rancid digestive fluid dripping constantly from the corners of its mouth. I didn't hesitate. Stepping forward, I snapped its neck cleanly in a matter of seconds. Suppressing the nausea rising in my stomach and the stench assaulting my senses, I carefully searched through its foul, murky brain matter. When zombie crystals were first discovered in the mid-stage of the apocalypse, they were already the size of a thumb. I guessed they must have existed in the early stage as well, only too small to be noticed. If I could find them early and use them properly, I could increase my strength at the fastest possible rate. My movements suddenly halted. My fingertips touched something hard. From that pool of rotting sludge, I slowly pulled out a tiny object no larger than my pinky nail. Just as I had expected, I had found an early-stage zombie crystal. I found a relatively clean spot, washed away the filth clinging to it, and examined it closely. It was the most ordinary gray crystal, its texture resembling rough stone, opaque and dull. Based on my experience from my previous life, this kind of gray crystal carried no special elemental attribute. Its primary effect after consumption was enhancing physical qualities: speed, strength, endurance, raising the upper limits of the human body. Only zombies that had evolved and awakened abilities would have crystals of different colors in their brains: red for fire, blue for water, yellow for earth. Only by absorbing these colored ability crystals could a person awaken corresponding abilities. In my last life, after summarizing the experiences of myself and other ability users, I discovered that if one first absorbed ordinary gray crystals, trained the body to its peak, and only then attempted to fuse an ability crystal, the success rate of awakening abilities increased significantly. Without further hesitation, I put the gray crystal straight into my mouth. It melted instantly, leaving no particular taste, only a faint hint of fishy bitterness. What surprised me was that whether due to the antitoxin serum already activated in my body, or my awakened self-healing ability being too powerful, the crystal fusion process, which had once left me in agony and nearly killed me, passed this time without incident. I only felt a gentle energy spreading from my abdomen, flowing through my bloodstream and filling every limb and bone with strength, as if I had endless vitality, desperate to run and leap. With a light jump, I leapt straight out of a second-floor factory window. When I landed, my body was light and steady, without the slightest impact. Over the next few days, I voluntarily took on all the shelter's tasks that involved going out to search for supplies. Using this opportunity, I continuously hunted zombies and collected gray crystals. Not every zombie had a crystal in its brain, so the workload was heavy, but my progress was astonishing. As I hunted and absorbed crystals, my physical abilities underwent a qualitative leap in a short time. Now, with a light jump, I could climb tall trees. When sprinting at full speed, my figure was little more than a fleeting afterimage. My self-healing ability also evolved. Even if I was accidentally scratched by a zombie, the wound would heal within minutes. That day, I was planning to leave the temporary shelter and head to my next destination. According to memories from my previous life, there was a hidden supply warehouse there, storing large quantities of food and medicine. Just then, a noisy commotion suddenly erupted outside the shelter, mixed with a familiar, grating shout. "As long as you hand Emily over, I'll let bygones be bygones." Hearing that familiar, detestable voice, the corner of my mouth curved upward. It seemed that after Amanda was expelled from the shelter, he really had gone running to the Black Crow camp. When the clamoring crowd saw me walk out, they subconsciously parted to make way. Standing opposite were people from the Black Crow camp, the same ones who had abducted me in my previous life and subjected me to endless suffering. At the front stood a burly man with a long knife scar across his face. His build was imposing, his eyes violent. When he saw me, he even let out a frivolous whistle. Seeing this enemy from my past life, my blood seemed to freeze instantly. A surge of intense disgust and hatred rose within me, making my hands tremble slightly. This man, codenamed Scarface, had once been a death row inmate. After the apocalypse broke out, he led a group of desperate criminals from the prison to form the Black Crow camp. They burned, killed, looted, and committed every imaginable evil, robbing other survivors of supplies and wantonly abusing women. They were a notorious malignant force in the apocalypse. "Long time no see, sister," Amanda said, staring at me with resentment, the last two words squeezed out through clenched teeth. She looked far more pampered than when she was disheveled in the shelter, brightly dressed, complexion rosy. After all, that temporary shelter had been hastily assembled by survivors, short on supplies, everyone barely scraping by. The Black Crow camp, however, thrived on plunder and was relatively wealthy in the early apocalypse. Amanda turned to Scarface, putting on a pitiful expression and whining. "Brother Scarface, it's him. He framed me, said I'd been bitten by zombies, and incited everyone to drive me out. If you hadn't saved me, I'd have died outside long ago." Scarface was clearly pleased by her coquettish demeanor. He pulled her into his arms and said arrogantly, "Don't worry, little sister. Your big brother will stand up for you today and make sure you get justice." Listening to him croak out "big brother" in that hoarse voice made my stomach churn with disgust. In my previous life, after I was abducted by them, I never yielded. They tortured me for information about other shelters, but I would rather die than comply. This time, it was Amanda instead. It seemed that to curry favor with the Black Crow camp, she had eagerly handed over the location of this temporary shelter and led them straight here. "Emily, we misunderstood you back then." Old Chen, the shelter's leader, hurried forward, bowing and scraping as he apologized to Amanda. "We were all fooled by Emily. We thought you'd really been bitten." Others quickly echoed him, desperate to distance themselves from me. Facing so many armed, ruthless thugs, the so-called camaraderie crumbled instantly. They chose without hesitation to push me out as a scapegoat. Amanda basked in their groveling apologies, her face full of smug triumph, and shot me a provocative look. "Sister, I don't want to make things difficult for you, but mistakes must be punished. How about this? Come back to the Black Crow camp with us and serve Brother Scarface and the others. That'll count as making amends." The others from the Black Crow camp all revealed greedy expressions, as if I were already theirs for the taking. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I turned and walked to the shelter window. The shelter was on the 28th floor of a commercial building. Looking down, I could see dense masses of zombies climbing upward, howling madly. A terrifying sight. When you were found bitten by a zombie, everyone saw it with their own eyes. Driving you out wasn't my decision alone. I slowly turned back, my gaze sweeping over everyone in the shelter. Under my stare, they all lowered their eyes in shame, unable to meet my gaze. I climbed onto the windowsill, and amid their horrified expressions, leapt straight down, leaving behind my final words. "I'm willing to use my life to prove I was telling the truth. Amanda was indeed bitten by a zombie." For me, Amanda's arrival was like a pillow delivered to someone dozing. Perfect timing. This way I could leave this fractured shelter openly and plant a seed of doubt in everyone's mind. I insisted Amanda had been bitten, yet never mutated. Now, that statement might seem unremarkable, but when the apocalypse entered its middle and late stages, resources grew scarcer and zombie evolution more dangerous, such virus immunity would not necessarily be a blessing. By then, people would be desperate to study it, perhaps even treat it as something inhuman. And that was exactly what I wanted. In midair, I precisely controlled my descent and stomped hard on the head of a zombie climbing the building. With a crisp crack, its skull shattered beneath my foot. At the same time, the impact sent a sharp pain through my ankle and knee, as if the bones had dislocated. Yet my expression didn't change. My evolved self-healing ability activated instantly. The pain vanished within 10 seconds, and my bones snapped back into place. As I landed among the zombie horde, they were instantly stirred, surging toward me from all sides. From the 28th floor above, it looked as if I was completely engulfed, with no chance of survival. But in reality, with my agile movements and incredible speed, I whirled effortlessly through the horde, vanishing from everyone's sight without a sound. After leaving the temporary shelter, guided by memories from my previous life, I headed straight for the Black Crow camp and several other infamous brutal camps. With my physique strengthened by gray crystals, my self-healing ability, and immunity to the virus, dealing with those thugs was effortless. I cut through them, one camp after another, easily eliminating Scarface and several other heinous leaders. I successfully rescued many female survivors whom I had been unable to save in my previous life due to my weakness. In their despair, they saw hope and willingly joined my ranks. In addition, many other survivors, having heard of my deeds, came seeking me out. Thus, my women's shelter was established earlier than in my previous life, and on a far greater scale. I shared everything I knew with the sisters in the camp, without reservation. I taught them how to make weapons, how to protect themselves during zombie attacks, and combat techniques for dealing with zombies. I explained the function of zombie crystals and the risks of absorption, teaching them how to distinguish ordinary crystals from ability crystals. I also led them in reclaiming land around the camp to plant hardy crops. I knew that by the mid-stage of the apocalypse, most stored food would expire and supplies would grow even scarcer. At that point, grain would become the most precious resource. The earlier we began farming, the more firmly we could stand in future crises. Watching the camp flourish filled me with satisfaction. Aside from a few elderly people and children, nearly all the women in the camp voluntarily attempted to fuse gray zombie crystals. Even if fusion failed, early-stage gray crystals wouldn't cause death like ability crystals. At worst, some temporary discomfort. After a period of testing, nearly half the camp's members successfully fused gray crystals, their physical abilities greatly enhanced. Coupled with daily combat training and real-world experience against zombies under my guidance, the camp's overall combat strength had become formidable. Whether facing newly evolving zombies or provocations from hostile camps, we could handle it with ease. Once the women's camp stabilized, I knew my goal here had been achieved. The next destination was calling to me, the Southern City A. According to the memories of my previous life, the first wave of zombie evolution had erupted from a massive horde in the south, and after that, zombie evolution across the country unfolded as if pre-programmed, breaking out at fixed points. My intuition told me that there had to be a hidden secret behind all of this. I gathered the core members of the camp and informed them of my decision to leave. All they needed to do was continue farming, train diligently, absorb crystals, and strengthen themselves. Surviving well here was not difficult. I looked earnestly at each familiar face, seeing reluctance and sorrow in their eyes. These sisters had all once been weak and bullied in the apocalypse, and it was this women's camp that had given them new life and hope. "Boss, let me go with you," a girl named Randy spoke up first. She was one of the earliest survivors I had saved, resilient by nature and formidable in combat. Many others quickly echoed her wish to leave with me. These voices were all too familiar, just like in my previous life, when they had followed me without hesitation to the military's main base and fought until the very last moment, sacrificing themselves to protect me. That had become an eternal ache in my heart. I closed my eyes, forcing down the bitterness, and shook my head. Where I was going was extremely dangerous, and what I intended to do was a gamble with death, with a very real chance of never returning. After a brief pause, I looked into their resolute eyes and asked if they had truly thought it through. In the end, more than a dozen core members still insisted on going with me. Unlike my previous life, this time I forcibly kept those who still had family or friends in the camp behind. The camp was still in its infancy and needed enough hands to guard it, and I could not let them abandon their loved ones for my sake. I comforted those who were saddened by not being able to leave with me, telling them not to worry. If I succeeded, we would surely reunite one day. Until then, I asked them to protect our home. With the others, we set off towards Southern City A. After days of non-stop travel, we arrived to find that the zombie horde had already erupted. Large numbers of evolved zombies were launching a fierce assault on the largest survivor camp in City A. These evolved zombies were nothing like the ones from the early days of the apocalypse. Many had awakened rudimentary abilities. Some moved as fast as lightning, others were massive as mountains, with greatly enhanced attack power and intelligence. They were no longer the slow, mindless monsters people remembered, but had become cunning and deadly. Zombies poured in from all directions, flooding the streets like a tide and launching wave after wave of attacks against City A's final survivor camp. Without hesitation, I led the squad straight into the battle. After continuous training and the enhancement from gray crystals, our overall strength far surpassed that of ordinary survivors, and our coordination had become seamless. Relying on my regenerative ability and formidable physique, I charged at the front to draw the zombies' attention, while Randy and the others rotated between offense and defense, according to our prearranged formation, using their weapons and crystal-enhanced strength to strike precisely at the zombies' weak points. These newly evolving zombies were no match for our squad. We cut through the horde while collecting the crystals from their brains. For us, this was not just a battle, but a prime opportunity to grow stronger. When daylight came and the sun grew intense, zombie activity dropped sharply and the horde gradually receded. The City A camp seized the moment to open their defensive net and let us in. "Thank you so much. Your support came just in time," said the camp leader, a woman in her 40s with short, practical hair already streaked with gray. Her face was lined with exhaustion, yet her eyes were unwavering and bright. Gripping my hand tightly, she spoke with emotion, saying that without our help during the night's horde, the camp would likely have fallen, with unimaginable consequences. I returned her handshake politely and asked about the specifics of the zombie evolution and the horde. Through our conversation, I learned that the first evolved zombies had been discovered by nearby small shelters, whose makeshift defenses were quickly overrun. Only a handful of survivors escaped and sought refuge in City A. One by one, surrounding shelters fell, until City A became the last stronghold, drawing the evolved zombies, now seemingly intelligent, to converge here for a final assault. Their ammunition was nearly exhausted, their food supplies critically low, and if things continued this way, the camp's fall was only a matter of time. Though she tried to hide it, deep despair still seeped into her voice. I smiled gently and told her not to be afraid. I had a solution. I explained everything I knew about zombie crystals, how to absorb them, enhance physical strength, and awaken abilities. She was skeptical at first, but when I produced several gray crystals and described our squad's transformation, she quickly believed me. After all, our performance in the horde had already left a deep impression. Concerned, she asked whether gray crystals were still safe now that zombies had evolved. I laughed, unzipped my backpack, and revealed it filled to the brim with gray crystals, assuring her we had prepared for this long ago. Based on our experience, I explained that after absorbing around 50 gray crystals, one would hit a physical bottleneck. But even so, we have stockpiled massive quantities for this day. From the very beginning, I had resolved that this apocalypse should not be a one-person show. Reborn with memories and experience, I wanted to use these advantages to save as many lives as possible. There should not be only one savior. Ordinary people struggling to protect themselves and their loved ones deserved the chance to grow stronger and control their own fate. That was why I shared all my knowledge without reservation. Once the crystals were distributed, the camp leader quickly organized their fighters to absorb them under my guidance. Meanwhile, I led my squad to our assigned rooms and poured out the evolved zombies' crystals we had collected. Larger and more translucent, they shimmered as I searched through them until I found a pale blue crystal, a water-type ability crystal. In my previous life, I had awakened water abilities. Amid my squad's anxious and hopeful gazes, I swallowed the crystal without hesitation. A cool energy spread instantly from my abdomen through my bloodstream. Unlike the near-death agony of my past awakening, this time the process was remarkably smooth, thanks to my strengthened body and regeneration. I could feel the energy within me changing, the moisture in the air responding to my call. With a wave of my hand, clear water gathered at my fingertips, shifting between razor-sharp blades and gentle streams. It worked! Boss, you did it! Randy and the others cheered excitedly. Though the horde in City A had not yet ended, many fighters in the camp had significantly improved after absorbing gray crystals, enabling them to fight back instead of merely defending. I knew that in the mid to late apocalypse, the struggle would be dominated by abilities rather than weapons. So the more ability users among humanity, the better. Over the next few days, I honed my water abilities in battle, upgrading them with water-type crystals, while guiding the camp's fighters in adapting to their strengthened bodies. Other squad members began experimenting with evolved gray crystals, discovering that their long-stagnant physical bottlenecks were finally loosening. They also noticed that purified gray crystals increased affinity towards certain elements. Randy, the boldest among them, was the first to absorb a red fire-type crystal. Though the fusion was painful, her solid foundation carried her through, and she successfully awakened fire abilities. Watching her wield blazing flames in battle, the rest could no longer restrain themselves, and chose crystals matching their affinities. Soon, everyone in the squad awakened abilities: lightning, earth, wind, and with these powers, our combat strength skyrocketed. Together with the City A camp, we quickly wiped out the surrounding horde. After resolving City A's crisis, I shared everything about evolved crystals and ability techniques with the camp leader, then led my squad onward. Following the pattern of past horde outbreaks, we traveled from city to city, helping survivor camps resist attacks while spreading crystal knowledge and supplying gray crystals to weaker camps. Under our efforts, more and more people awakened abilities, vastly strengthening humanity. With earlier and more widespread awakenings, casualties during the first evolution wave were far lower than in my previous life. To my surprise, through constant battle and absorption, I awakened a second ability space. This trump card ability allowed storage of massive supplies and short-distance teleportation, though it was still in its early stages and required constant refinement. Leading the squad non-stop across cities, fighting and growing stronger, I never dared relax. Deep down, I felt a guiding voice. Rebirth was not just for revenge or survival. There was something greater waiting. One day, as our off-road vehicle sped along a broad highway, the radio crackled with a broken signal, and then a clear male voice came through. "If you receive this message, please, if conditions allow, we are heading to City S, where a human stronghold will be established, welcoming all survivors to join forces, resist the zombies, and rebuild our home." Boss, are we really going to City S? Randy looked at me with bright, eager eyes, her voice filled with anticipation. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel and jerked it sharply, the off-road vehicle swinging around and charging straight towards City S. Set off, just like in my previous life. Once again, we embarked on the road to City S, but this time was different. In this life, every member of our squad possessed powerful abilities and extensive combat experience, and the zombies we encountered along the way were no longer a threat, but stepping stones for strengthening ourselves. As a result, we reached City S far faster than before. Just as we were driving the off-road vehicle toward the coordinates of the main base mentioned by the military, a fully armed unit suddenly blocked our path. At the front stood a tall man with a stern expression, dressed in a crisp military uniform with officer insignia on his shoulders, his sharp gaze sweeping over our squad as he asked in a deep voice, "Is there a Ms. Emily among you?" I stepped forward calmly and replied, "I am Emily." A flicker of surprise crossed his eyes, and he immediately extended his hand, his tone turning warm. "Ms. Emily, I've heard much about you. I'm Feng, head of the operations department. During this zombie mutation crisis, the team you led assisted multiple cities in successfully resisting zombie tides and achieved remarkable merit." I shook his hand and said politely, "Commander Zhao, you flatter me. We only did what we should have done." "You're too modest," Feng said with a smile. Then, his expression grew serious as he changed the subject. "We stopped your team today because there is an urgent rescue mission that we hope you can assist with." He then explained the situation in detail. After the apocalypse broke out, the military continued to resist the zombies while simultaneously pouring all efforts into developing antiviral agents. But not long ago, an underground secret research base on the outskirts of City S suffered an incident. Many highly evolved and extremely violent zombies that had been confined in the laboratories broke free, launching frenzied attacks on researchers and guards alike. And due to the suddenness of the event, the scientific staff suffered heavy casualties. In the rushed evacuation, the core research data of the institute was not brought out in time, and the project's chief scientist, Dr. Miller, was currently missing, his fate unknown. This rescue mission was to go deep into the underground laboratory, search for and rescue Dr. Miller, and retrieve the core research data at all costs. Dr. Miller was a leading authority in virus research, and his data was crucial to the development of antiviral agents. If he could be rescued and the data recovered, the odds of humanity winning this apocalyptic war for survival would greatly increase. Fang looked at me with earnest intensity and said sincerely, "Ms. Emily, we know this mission is extremely dangerous, but with your team's strength, you may be the only ones capable of completing it." I was just about to agree when an unexpected voice suddenly rang out. "Commander Zhao, don't worry. My sister is the kindest person there is. She will definitely help us." I turned toward the voice and saw Amanda step out from behind Fang, a fake smile plastered on her face as she casually linked her arm through mine, making us look close and intimate to any onlooker. She leaned in close, lowered her voice, and whispered so only the two of us could hear, "Didn't expect this, did you, sister? We meet again." After agreeing to join the rescue mission, we set off immediately with the military, rushing non-stop toward the underground laboratory. At Amanda's insistence, she rode in the same vehicle as me. I drove the off-road vehicle in silence, my thoughts in turmoil. At this point in my previous life, the military had not yet reached the temporary shelter where we were. So why was Amanda here now? Was it because the many changes I made this time triggered a butterfly effect? Moreover, Amanda had always hated me to the bone, and after my rebirth I had made her suffer quite a bit, so seeing me again, she should not be acting this affectionate. Why was she pretending we were close? What secrets was she hiding? And what was she plotting? Question after question swirled through my mind, leaving me increasingly perplexed, yet my expression remained calm, betraying nothing. Finally, Amanda broke the silence first, her tone carrying a trace of barely concealed provocation. "Seeing that I'm still alive, are you surprised?" I didn't respond, knowing that silence often makes an opponent reveal more by exposing their own impatience. Sure enough, seeing me remain quiet, Amanda gradually lost her composure, her voice turning sharp with anger. "You were reborn from the start, weren't you? That's why you're so different from your last life. Clearly you were supposed to be captured by the Black Crow camp and tortured to death." I glanced sideways at her and deliberately replied in an indifferent tone. "What, was life in the Black Crow camp not to your liking? Didn't Scarface take good care of you?" At the mention of Scarface, Amanda's expression twisted instantly, her eyes burning with hatred and rage as she ground out, "You deliberately brought up the fact that I'd been bitten by a zombie in front of those people, didn't you? Because you knew exactly how they would treat me. Emily, you're truly vicious." I couldn't help letting out a soft laugh as I looked at her and said, "So not obediently falling into your trap makes me vicious? Amanda, I merely returned your own methods back to you. Everything you did to me before is now simply coming back to you." She was left speechless, snorted heavily, and threw out one last line, "Don't get smug too early. It's still not certain who will win," before refusing to say another word. Inwardly, I began to piece things together. From what Amanda had just said, I could be certain of one thing. She too had been reborn. In my previous life, the key memories involving her were the false accusation that drove me out of the shelter, and the final encirclement led by her squad of ability users against me. After my rebirth, I altered the course of that accusation, and with my past life memories and experience, my strength grew rapidly, to the point that I could now easily handle those ability users who once hunted me down. But now that Amanda had also been reborn, she naturally knew many things from the past and would not sit idly by. I didn't know what cards she held in this life or whom she had allied with, but I knew the road ahead would be far more difficult. Still, soldiers come and we block them, floods come and we dam them. Whatever schemes she had prepared, I was ready to face them. We hurried on, and soon arrived at the location of the underground laboratory, a secret base hidden deep within the mountains, its entrance concealed by dense forest and camouflage nets, impossible to find without military guidance. After checking personnel and equipment, we fully armed ourselves and took a special elevator down into the laboratory. The elevator descended for nearly 10 minutes before stopping, and the moment the doors opened, a lightning-fast berserk zombie lunged out, more agile than ordinary evolved zombies, its teeth and claws gleaming coldly. However, the military operators were well-trained and quick to react. and before it could get close, several laser shots struck its head, dropping it lifeless to the ground. The laboratory lay 3 kilometers underground, and with most of the lighting destroyed by zombies, the place was shrouded in darkness, lit only by faint silver-green indicator lights in the corners. Blood spattered the floors and walls, shattered glass and instruments lay scattered everywhere, and the air was thick with the stench of blood mixed with the unique rot of zombies, while an unattended, piercing alarm echoed endlessly, casting the entire laboratory in a chilling, oppressive atmosphere. We advanced quietly and cautiously, avoiding the mutilated bodies of researchers and guards strewn along the way. Along the route, we encountered many berserk zombies that had escaped their cages, creatures far more violent and powerful than the evolved zombies outside. But coordinating with the military personnel, we divided tasks clearly, cutting down zombies while pushing deeper into the lab. All the while, I could feel Amanda's gaze locked onto me, filled with undisguised hostility and calculation. Though the journey was perilous, our strength carried us through without disaster, and we finally reached the data storage room deep within the laboratory, only to discover that the container holding the core research data was gone. "It seems we'll have to continue searching," Feng said with a frown. Just as we were about to move on, Randy, whose hearing was unusually sharp, suddenly pointed in one direction and whispered, "There's movement over there. Sounds like there are survivors." We immediately became alert and moved cautiously in that direction, and after several hundred meters, we found a figure in a white lab coat curled up in the corner of a sealed glass laboratory. "It's Dr. Miller," Feng said, relief finally crossing his face. The person inside heard the commotion, slowly raised her head, and turned around, and when I saw her face, memories buried deep in my mind surged back to life. In my previous life, when I led the women's camp toward the military stronghold in City S, we had rescued a badly injured female researcher along the way, unconscious at the time, and carried her with us until we were ambushed by Amanda. Thinking about it now, that researcher had been Dr. Miller. My heart sank sharply, and I turned quickly to check Amanda's reaction, only to find she was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Amanda?" I shouted. Everyone looked around in alarm, only then realizing that not only Amanda was missing, but several soldiers were gone as well. Something's wrong. The alarm bells in my head rang loudly, and I immediately sprinted back the way we came. At that moment, a heavy iron gate suddenly slammed down ahead, blue electrical currents crackling across it to form a power grid that completely cut off our retreat. Amanda appeared on the other side of the gate, her face wearing a dark, triumphant smile as she looked at us and said slowly, "The laboratory's self-destruct mode has been activated. In 10 minutes, you'll all be buried here." She paused, her gaze locking onto me with intense hatred. "Emily, even if we start over, you're still destined to lose to me." With that, she said no more, leading the missing soldiers away and disappearing swiftly down the corridor. The others fell into panic at her words, especially the young soldiers, whose faces filled with despair as they turned to Feng for help. "It seems Louis plans to wipe out all his opponents in one sweep," Dr. Miller said as she stepped out of the glass lab, her face carrying a cold, mocking smile. Under Feng's questioning, Dr. Miller revealed the truth. Among the current top leadership, aside from Feng, who handled military operations, there was also Louis, responsible for strategic planning, and the zombie incident in the underground laboratory was no accident, but a scheme orchestrated by Louis himself. During her research, Dr. Miller had discovered that Louis was secretly exploiting her results. He was never trying to develop antiviral drugs, but instead accelerating zombie evolution to extract ability crystals from their brains and build a force of ability users loyal only to him. To obtain more and stronger crystals, Louis even went so far as to release zombie mutation catalysts into nearby cities, accelerating the evolution of ordinary zombies and bringing catastrophic disaster to survivors. When Dr. Miller uncovered his plot and refused to continue serving his plans, Louis, fearing she would expose his secrets, engineered the laboratory accident to silence her and all those in the know. This so-called rescue mission was also meticulously designed by him, intended to lure Feng, his military rival, and my rapidly rising ability user squad into the underground lab and eliminate us all using the self-destruct system, clearing every obstacle in his path to supreme power. Dr. Miller's words confirmed my suspicions. In my previous life, the real reason Amanda led ability users to ambush me beyond our personal grudges, was that after Dr. Miller's rebirth, she chose to side with Lewis and become his pawn, and the true target of that ambush had never been me. It was Dr. Miller beside me all along. In this lifetime, Amanda awakened his memories ahead of time and contacted Lewis much earlier, and together they devised a plan that was even more meticulous and far more vicious, intending to eliminate everyone who might stand in their way in one fell swoop. That was precisely why Amanda had desperately instigated Fang to stop my squad and rope us into this so-called rescue mission. Self-destruction program activated. Countdown, 60 seconds. 59, 58. Despair spread across everyone's faces. With only 60 seconds, breaking through the electrified iron gate in front of us was practically impossible. I took a deep breath and forced myself to calm down. Now, the only hope lay in my spatial ability. After continuous honing and improvement over this period of time, my spatial ability was already capable of spatial movement within a 5-kilometer range. But I had never attempted to transport so many people at once. This would be an enormous test of both my mental strength and my control over my ability. But there was no other choice left. This was an attempt that could not fail. I focused all my mental power and mobilized the spatial energy within my body, a faint blue glow gradually emanating from me as spatial energy gathered and swirled around my form. Everyone, get close to me, stick as close as you can. Randy was the first to realize what I was about to do, and immediately shouted to the others. Feng reacted just as quickly, urgently organizing everyone to huddle together around me. I struggled to slowly expand the blue halo of energy around my body, inch by inch, until everyone was enveloped within it. The process consumed an astonishing amount of mental energy. Fine beads of sweat soon appeared on my forehead, and a dull pain began to throb in my head. 10, 9, 8. The countdown continued, pressing in relentlessly. Finally, when only 3 seconds remained, the blue halo completely encompassed everyone. I clenched my teeth, poured every last ounce of strength into it, and abruptly activated my ability. Spatial transfer. In the next instant, the floor beneath our feet vanished, replaced by soft soil and the fresh scent of grass. The massive drain on my energy made my vision go black, and I nearly collapsed, but Randy quickly caught me. A deafening thud echoed from not far away, followed by violent ground collapse. Thick black smoke billowing up from the depression. That was the location of the underground laboratory. We had escaped at the very last moment. The laboratory's self-destruction device had been precisely calculated and was devastatingly powerful. There was no way they could have survived. On a distant hillside, Amanda and several ability users who had betrayed the military stood there, watching the collapsing, smoking ground with evident satisfaction. Because I deliberately maintained a brief spatial concealment after initiating the transfer, they did not notice our presence at all. Just as Amanda's triumphant words faded, an ability user in a black trench coat behind him suddenly stepped forward without warning, instantly condensing an ice blue blade in his hand and mercilessly plunging it into Amanda's waist. Caught completely off guard, Amanda's body stiffened as he slowly turned his head in disbelief, staring at the person behind him and asking in a trembling voice, "Why?" The ability user's face remained expressionless as he replied coldly, "Boss Louis said that the future belongs to ability users, and the virus antibody in your body is too much of a hindrance. Keeping you alive would only obstruct the boss's plans." As he spoke, he twisted his wrist, driving the ice blade deeper. Ice element energy surged along the blade into Amanda's body, freezing his blood and meridians, and his body began to stiffen and ice over at a visible speed. His eyes widened, filled with fear, resentment, and disbelief, before freezing forever in that final moment. Seizing the opportunity, I lifted the spatial concealment and signaled to the team. Before the traitors could even react, we charged forward like arrows loosed from a bow. Each of us now possessed formidable abilities, and dealing with those few betrayers was effortless. Before long, they fell under our attacks, their life signs completely extinguished. Fang frowned as he looked at Amanda's ice-sealed corpse on the ground, a trace of regret in his voice. What a pity about the virus antibody in his body. The samples we collected earlier weren't complete, and a full antibody sample would have been a great help for developing antiviral agents. I smiled and patted him on the shoulder. No need to regret it. I have it. Feng's eyes widened, clearly not understanding what I meant, while Dr. Miller, standing nearby, had a flash of ecstasy cross his eyes. He stepped forward in a rush, gripping my hand tightly and saying excitedly, "Miss Emily, my antiviral agent research has already yielded preliminary results. If you're willing to cooperate and let us extract your antibody for study, I'm confident it won't be long before we can completely eradicate the zombie virus." I firmly returned his grip and replied sincerely, "Dr. Miller, I'm willing to cooperate fully, without reservation." After we returned to the S-City military headquarters, Feng immediately launched a sweeping operation, conducting a thorough internal purge of the military with lightning speed and eliminating every mole and accomplice planted by Louis. Louis himself was quickly brought under control, his conspiracy completely crushed, and he received the punishment he deserved. I, meanwhile, devoted myself fully to assisting Dr. Miller with antiviral research. My body was not only immune to the zombie virus, but also possessed powerful regenerative abilities, making me a natural test subject. With my cooperation, the efficiency of antiviral drug development skyrocketed. In just half a year, Dr. Miller successfully developed an aerosolized antibody agent capable of completely eradicating the zombie virus. This agent had extremely strong diffusion properties. Once released into the air, it could instantly deactivate the virus within zombies and kill them outright, while also allowing humans who inhaled it to develop permanent viral antibodies, rendering them forever immune to infection. This meant that the apocalyptic catastrophe that had plagued the world for years was finally approaching its end. When the news spread, the entire world erupted in celebration. More and more survivors, camps, and organizations joined our ranks, and the S-City military headquarters gradually developed into the largest and most powerful human settlement on Earth. Agriculture and industry began to recover, step by step, and upon the ruins, humanity once again rekindled its hope for life.